Hi everyone, Scott here, and I wanted to do a video similar to a couple of videos I've done in years past. When the 20th anniversary of a particularly great movie year has come up, I did a little retrospective video on the best that came out then. And of course 20 years ago this year was 1994, and so I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the best movies I saw then. Not to say that 91 and 93 didn't have good movies, because they did, but some movies some years kind of stand out to me in terms of the quality of their films. I did videos on 1990 and 1992, and so I'm now like to talk a little bit about 94. Unless you're a little kid who's a big fan of The Lion King, when asked what's the best movie of 1994, you're probably going to come up with one of three titles, depending on who you ask. Someone will either say Forrest Gump was the best movie of the year, or Pulp Fiction, or The Shawshank Redemption. And I like all three of these movies as well. They were basically my top three movies of the year. I rank Gump as number one, just because it was just so unique. But of course a lot of people argue that Pulp Fiction is edgier, that Shawshank is more heartfelt, less overly sappy than Forrest Gump, whatever. It all depends basically on who you are and what your tastes are. But I think all three movies are quite excellent, and I saw each one at least twice in the theater. I was very happy about that. Shawshank in particular has beautiful cinematography. Forrest Gump had, cutting-edge visual effects and a great score by Alan Silvestri. He was also, both of them I found quite moving at times, but of course Forrest Gump had that added zip of satire as well as sentimentality. And Pulp Fiction, of course, was like, the independent movie to end all independent movies. It was just such a talked about movie, and everyone, just loved it and thought it was just so innovative, and the acting, and it was just so shocking, and the music and everything like that. Yeah, it's quite good. Not my favorite Tarantino movie, but yeah, hard to deny it's quite good. My other movies on my the other movies on my best of year list included Leanna, which was a drama by David Mamet, which was adapted from his play. And when I say adapted, I mean it was pretty much just a direct translation to the screen. It basically takes place in one location, involves two characters, and is exactly 3 scenes long, each scene being at least a half an hour long. William H. Macy is a college professor. He gets into a disagreement with one of his students about his conduct, and so it's basically this long sort of period of negotiation where he's defending himself and she's accusing him of inappropriate behavior. It's really, really compelling movie. Some people would probably hate it just because it's only 2 characters in one location, and it's so obviously from a play. And sometimes I like that and sometimes I don't. It depends. Doubt, I thought, was a little bit too much like the play. Could have been opened up a little bit more, even though they used more than just one location in that movie. Other times I find the adaptation works not as well. I don't know. It just depends on the film. But Oleana is a movie I like quite a bit. Peter Jackson directed a film that came out that year, Heavenly Creatures. It was his first non-genre movie. And to date, the only other non-genre movie he's made technically is The Lovely Bones, although that does sort of have an afterlife fantasy in it. But prior to this, of course, he did the horror movie Bad Taste, and Dead Alive, or Brain Dead as it's known in some countries, and Meet the Feebles, which is a twisted Muppet movie. But Heavenly Creatures, of course, had Kate Winslet and Melanie Lynskey at pretty much the start of their careers, portraying 2 real girls whose friendship became all twisted up in fantasy, and they ended up killing a person. Quite a good movie. And the last few scenes of that movie have some wonderful music in it that really are wonderful. The Paper is a Ron Howard comic drama with Michael Keaton as a writer for a newspaper in New York City, trying to basically find a source that will exonerate 2 kids that have been accused of a shooting. There's a really good cast of this: Glenn Close, Marissa Tomei, Randy Quaid, a whole bunch of really good people in this. It's a fast-paced, fun film. Really like it a lot. Not one of the more regarded films in Ron Howard's career, but it's definitely one of my favorites. The Hudsucker Proxy was a Coen Brothers movie that came out during the start of the year. I actually managed to see this at an advanced screening, sort of a test screening where they ask you to evaluate the movie afterwards. So it was before any trailers or clips or anything like that come out. I was just blown away by this movie. It was just so beautiful. The music was incredible. Tim Robbins, of course, it takes place in the 50s. Tim Robbins is this naive guy who gets hired by the Hudson Company and has the idea for the hula hoop, and then becomes like the, through a series of shenanigans, becomes like the CEO of the company, but he's really just a puppet because Paul Newman is manipulating him. Jennifer Jason Leigh and Bruce Campbell also have big parts in the film. Really, really fun movie. Some people don't like it that much. I like it a lot. The Underneath is a Steven Soderbergh film. Peter Gallagher, who had a big role in Soderbergh's first film, Sex, Lies, and Videotape. He's the main character. He's a guy basically who gets a job with his stepfather at an armored car company, and he gets into some trouble with a local gangster because the gangster's girlfriend is his ex-girlfriend, and so he sort of tries to get himself out of trouble by offering to stage a robbery, an armored car heist for them, and things don't work out quite as planned. Soderbergh really didn't like how this movie came out, and so he took a break to sort of clear his throat, if you will, creatively. And then he came back with movies like Out of Sight and Aaron Brockovich and Traffic and the Oceans movies. But I like the movie quite a lot. I think it's a really cool film. Great style too, great visual style. Quiz Show is a drama that Robert Redford directed. Of course, he's had a long career of directing movies and also starring in them. This one, he doesn't actually appear in it. The main character is played by Ralph Fiennes. He's a professor who is basically, he tries out for a game show on television in the 1950s. His name is Charles Van Doren. He's also the son of a very well-renowned professor and scholar. On the show, he competes against John Turturro, and John Turturro loses, and then Charles Van Doren's, the character Charles Van Doren, he goes on to win a whole bunch of money and have a very big career and become quite famous. But later on, Turturro tries to get everyone to believe that the whole thing is rigged, that it's not really a game show, that it's more like a series of well-planned climaxes, because all the questions and answers are given to the contestants in advance, and they're actually encouraged to perform like they're frustrated or they can't think of the answer by patting their brow to, because they're sweaty and nervous, fidgeting and what have you. It's all basically just a big put on. And so Rob Morrow, he's a federal investigator who starts looking into the matter. Really good movie. It's been on cable a number of times recently, so I've had a chance to look at it again. Good drama. David Paymer is also in it, Hank Azaria, and Paul Schofield plays Ray Fiennes' father. He's a really good character actor. Ed Wood, of course, is one of Tim Burton's best movies. Johnny Depp plays Edward D. Wood Jr., the director of Plan 9 from Outer Space, and so this is sort of an unconventional comic biographical picture. Really great cast in this one as well. It's one of my favorite Tim Burton movies. That rounds out my top 10 of the year. I'd also like to mention movies like Leon, of course, by Luc Besson, with Natalie Portman and Jean Reno and Gary Oldman. Natural Born Killers by Oliver Stone. It's based on this Quentin Tarantino story with Woody Harrelson and Juliette Lewis as a couple of mass murdering lovers on the run, and they're tracked not only by the cop played by Tom Sizemore, but also a TV personality played by Robert Downey Jr. and his whole big sort of showbiz satire. Unfortunately, my favorite scene in the movie was cut, but it's probably on one of the special edition DVDs. That's the one where they go to trial and Ashley Judd testifies against them. That's a really, really great scene. Interview with the Vampire, of course, was a movie that I didn't really dig all that much when I first saw it, mostly because of Brad Pitt, but I kind of got into it later on. But it's not like one of my favorite movies of the year. It's somewhat significant, though, of course. Brad Pitt, of course, is based on the novel by Anne Rice. Tom Cruise plays Lestat, the vampire that turns Brad Pitt into a vampire, and they go on this, sort of a century-long adventure of exploring different places in Europe. And of course the Americas as well. They pick up a child vampire along the way, played by Kirsten Dunst, one of her very first roles. Antonio Banderas, Stephen Ray are also in it. Antonio Banderas is quite cool in the movie. I really like him a lot. He and Tom Cruise are definitely the better performances in that film. One of my favorite Jim Carrey movies, of course, is The Mask. where he basically is sweet on Cameron Diaz, and he discovers the mask that turns him into this green-faced alter ego that's like, you know, the Tasmanian devil, but a real-life version of that. Jim Carrey, of course, had a huge year in '94. It was like his big movie debut. He was in the first Ace Ventura movie and, of course, the first Dumb and Dumber movie, all in one year. But The Mask is a favorite of mine because he plays a normal guy for most of the picture and only goes crazy for some of it, whereas in the other movies he's pretty much crazy or just an idiot most of the time. Speed was, of course, John DeBont's directorial debut. He went on to do Speed 2 Cruise Control and Twister and Lara Croft 2 and other less reputable films. But of course that's the one where Keanu Reeves learns that there's a bomb rigged to a bus that will explode if the bus slows to less than 50 miles an hour. The bus driver gets shot, Sandra Bullock takes over, meanwhile Dennis Hopper's on the phone taunting him and everything like that. Good, solid thriller, lots of fun. I really enjoyed the movie a lot. Also that same summer, True Lies is just like sort of the antithesis of Speed. It was like this huge mega budget with all these set pieces and digital effects and Schwarzenegger and James Cameron and Jamie Lee Curtis. There was actually a live chat on the Joe Blow site this Sunday that I got to participate in. True Lies is just sort of like a monster of a movie, and not all of it works. In fact, most of the action sequences of the movie are pretty boring, but I like the comedy of it because Schwarzenegger is this secret agent who's hiding the fact that he is an agent from his family. And so when things go haywire, they get involved, and kind of like all the shenanigans involving that are a lot more fun than the actual action chase scenes, except for the last one, though, where he's flying the hover jet and trying to rescue his daughter from a skyscraper. That one's just so crazy, I have to love it. The Crow came out that year, the first Crow movie. Not that there's been a lot of really great Crow movies, but the first one that was directed by Alex Proyas, who went on to do Dark City and Knowing. Of course, starred Brandon Lee. And not a great movie, but I did enjoy it at the time. Disclosure was a movie that was based on a Michael Crichton novel who wrote Jurassic Park. It was directed by Barry Levinson, who did Rain Man and a bunch of other films. Michael Douglas and Demi Moore, the main characters. It's all about sort of corporate malfeasance and what have you. Decent drama, you know, kind of fun. Not my favorite movie of the year, but I ended up looking at basically IMDb page on 1994 and found a lot of movies that I either didn't like or didn't care about. So maybe the movie year overall wasn't quite as good as I remember it, but there were still plenty that I did like. Star Trek Generations, for example, is not a well-liked Star Trek movie, but it's one that I like quite a bit. Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out in '94. That's sort of the meta version of Nightmare on Elm Street, where the actress who played Nancy in the first movie, she's basically playing herself, but then she finds out Freddy is real and that he'll emerge into reality if there isn't a new Nightmare on Elm Street movie made or something like that. It's kind of crazy. Wolf was a movie I was really excited to see, with Jack Nicholson playing a guy who was bitten by a werewolf. And Michelle Pfeiffer and James Spader are his co-stars. I thought it would be really over the top, and it's actually quite a restrained drama. It's from Michael Nichols, and there's a lot of really good stuff involving him just maneuvering, sort of, again, it's sort of like that office intrigue type of thing that I find kind of cool. Yeah, it's more subtle than just Jack Nicholson going crazy for 2 hours. But yeah, decent movie, really decent movie. One of my favorite Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, if you can call it that, is Time Cop. And what I mean by that is, like, there's very few Van Damme movies that I like that I would ever call my favorites, but Time Cop is a really, really clever time travel movie with Jean-Claude Van Damme traveling back about 10 years to stop a senator from stealing money, and along the way he has the opportunity to save his wife who got killed. The Legend of Drunken Master, I understand, came out that year. I believe that was the one where Jackie Chan crawls on his hands and feet over hot coals at one point. I'm not really sure about that, but I did get to see that years later in the theater. And, you know, Jackie Chan's, you know, just an incredible guy overall, especially at his peak. There's a comedy called Threesome with Josh Charles and Lara Flynn Boyle and Stephen Baldwin that I thought was really good. Swimming with Sharks was a movie that Kevin Spacey appeared in. It was right before he became super famous. This is sort of a low-budget indie movie with him playing a film executive who's kidnapped by the assistant that he's been terrorizing and abusing. The assistant's played by Frank Whaley. I wasn't sure whether this movie actually came out in '94. It could be '95, but because I was reading this article about Kevin Spacey, like how that was the big year for him, the year of Seven and The Usual Suspects. But IMDb has listed it at '94, so I don't know. Also making a big splash that year was Danny Boyle, who directed Shallow Grave the year before Trainspotting came out. Or maybe it was 2 years. I'm not really sure when Trainspotting came out exactly. It could be '96. Shallow Grave, of course, was also the big debut of Ewan McGregor. I don't remember a whole lot about either of those two movies. I only saw them one time a piece. So overall, I think my reaction to them was positive, but it's hard to say at this point. But they're certainly noteworthy. Immortal Beloved has Gary Oldman playing Beethoven. I love this movie for the cinematography and, of course, for the music. Only really saw that movie one time as well, but I did like it at the time. Surviving the Game is an action movie where Ice-T is this homeless guy who's basically hired for a job by Rutger Hauer, who takes him to this cabin out in the middle of the forest to have dinner with a bunch of his friends, and then they would start the job the next day. But the job is him actually being hunted through the forest by all these guys for sport. Anyway, there's a bunch of really good actors in it. John McGinley, Gary Busey, one of his best roles. Just a bunch of really cool guys. F. Murray Abraham. Yeah, fun movie, and a lot of really good character actors just having a ball playing bad guys in it. Serial Mom was a John Waters movie in which Kathleen Turner winds up killing a whole bunch of people in her neighborhood who she feels has broken the rules, the unwritten rules of proper suburban life, whatever. The Last Seduction was Linda Fiorentino's big breakout role. It actually aired on cable first, which is why she didn't qualify for Best Actress Oscar, but it's still worth checking out. It was directed by John Dahl, who did Joyride, and a few other notable thrillers. The Ref is a Dennis Leary movie in which he takes Kevin Spacey and Judy Davis hostage. He's on the run from cops, having just committed a robbery in a nearby home. And so when he takes them back to their place, as it turns out, all their hateable relatives are coming over for Christmas dinner, and so he poses as their marriage counselor, and everything just goes haywire. Love Dennis Leary. Bullets Over Broadway was a really great Woody Allen movie that came out that year with John Cusack and Diane Wiest. Mary Louise Parker, Chaz Palminteri as the hitman who ends up rewriting the play and making it better. It's a really good movie. Death and the Maiden was a Polanski movie, a Roman Polanski that came out in the early part of the year. Or no, I think that was '95. At least it came out in Chicago in '95. But it's pretty much my favorite Roman Polanski movie, so I thought I'd mention it. Ben Kingsley is this guy who has car trouble. And so he is waiting at the house of Stuart Wilson and Sigourney Weaver. As it turns out, Sigourney Weaver is actually taken hostage or taken prisoner by this fascist government, and Ben Kingsley was the doctor that sort of supervised her torture, and so she ends up taking him hostage and trying to force a confession out of him. Really, really good film. The Road to Wellville is kind of a wacky comedy by Alan Parker. Anthony Hopkins plays Dr. Kellogg, the guy who invented the cornflake, and he runs this whole sort of treatment facility where people to get healthy and restricts their diet and what have you. Matthew Broderick and Lara Flynn Boyle, a couple of the other people in the movie, but the centerpiece really is the kid, one of Anthony Hopkins' adopted sons, who keeps resisting the rules in these flashbacks to his youth, which I thought was pretty cool. I wanted to mention Highlander 3, mostly because, not because it's a really good movie, because it was directed by Andy Morahan, who did several significant Guns N' Roses music videos at the time, and also because the trailer was so hilarious, because half of it were these crane shots of guys standing in the middle of some big space going, "Ah!" as lightning bolts into them. I think that Mario Van Peebles was the villain in that movie. Captives was a drama with Tim Roth and Julia Ormond. Tim Roth was in prison, and she was like a dentist who was attending to the prisoners, and they have sort of an unapproved relationship. I think she helps him to escape. I never actually saw the movie, but I wanted to mention it just because it's one of those films I'm like, gee, I'd really like to see that one someday. I just haven't gotten around to it. China Moon was a film noir type of deal with Ed Harris and Madeline Stowe. She's married to this powerful businessman. He's a cop, and that doesn't turn out well for either of them. They're seeing each other secretly, and things get worse from there. It's a good little thriller. Benicio del Toro and Charles Dance are also in it. And I wanted to mention also Sleep With Me, which was the movie in which Quentin Tarantino talks to some guy about Top Gun, his pet theory on Top Gun. I never really saw the movie, just that one scene, but I thought I'd mention it. Here are a couple of movies that are also significant in different ways. Legends of the Fall was a big hit for Brad Pitt the year before Seven came out. Clear and Present Danger was another Harrison Ford, Tom Clancy movie. Better than Patriot Games, but still not as good as Hunt for Red October. Clerks, Kevin Smith's first movie, of course. Wyatt Earp was this huge gargantuan western, 3.5 hours long, that Kevin Costner made. It was a huge bomb. I thought for sure it would get a Best Picture nomination because it just looked like the kind of movie that would get a Best Picture nomination, but of course it didn't. No one really liked it. The Flintstones was a movie that had a trailer come out the year before with Jurassic Park, and everyone just roared with laughter when they saw John Goodman was playing Fred Flintstone going, yabba dabba doo, and like the best thing about that movie was the teaser. You know, the movie could never possibly live up to the promise of the teaser of John Goodman playing Fred Flintstone. Kenneth Branagh directed a film called Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which is probably the worst Frankenstein movie ever made. So incredibly over the top. Helena Bonham Carter's in it, Tom Hulce, and of course Robert De Niro playing the monster. Reality Bites was a big sort of indie kind of cool hit movie. I didn't really like it that much. Ben Stiller directed it. Winona Ryder and Ethan Hawke are also in it. Don Juan DeMarco is a movie which Johnny Depp plays this guy in a mental hospital who thinks that he's the real Don Juan, and Marlon Brando is his therapist. A lot of people really like that movie a lot. The Client was another John Grisham movie. John Grisham, of course, was known for his legal novels, his legal thrillers, and this was another movie that Joel Schumacher directed. He also did A Time to Kill. This one had Susan Sarandon and Tommy Lee Jones. Nell, of course, is a movie where Jodie Foster has been living out in the middle of the woods, speaking her own language ever since she was a child, and so she's brought back into civilization by Liam Neeson. The Specialist. The Specialist is a terrible, terrible, terrible movie with Sylvester Stallone playing a bomb expert who's hired by Sharon Stone to take out the people who killed her family. But the great thing about this movie is James Woods. He plays the guy who's trying to stop Stallone, and he has a ball with this role. He just has a ball. I love James Woods so much, and he's great in what is a really, really terrible movie. The next Karate Kid I never actually saw, but of course it's the big debut of Hilary Swank. In the Mouth of Madness was a John Carpenter movie about a novelist who finds out that his fictional horror town is actually real, or he just goes crazy and visits it or something like that. I only saw it one time. Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation is the first movie that paired up Matthew McConaughey and Renee Zellweger long before anybody knew who they were. Only You is an early Robert Downey Jr. Comedy, of course, along with Natural Born Killers. This is long before he became a star with Iron Man. Of course he was known at the time, but this is just like a romantic comedy where he's trying to win Marissa Tomei's heart, something like that. I never actually saw it. Blown Away was a movie I was very disappointed by. Jeff Bridges and his father Lloyd Bridges are bomb experts, or his father is a former cop anyway, but they're trying to stop Tommy Lee Jones from blowing up Boston. Really, really, really terrible movie. Bad Girls, also a really terrible movie. It's a Western with Drew Barrymore and Madeline Stowe, Annie MacDowell, Mary Stuart Masterson being terrorized by the creepy, chauvinistic men of the Old West, and they pull out their guns and start shooting at everybody. Very bad movie. The Shadow, another really bad movie with Alec Baldwin playing a comic book character. The Getaway was a remake of a Steve McQueen, Alan McGraw movie with Alec Baldwin, Kim Basinger. It's a terrible, terrible movie. Here's a movie that I forgot all about until I saw the entry on IMDb. It's called IQ, and it's about Tim Robbins trying to woo Meg Ryan with the help of Albert Einstein, who's played by Walter Matthau. Shopping was the first movie directed by Paul W.S. Anderson, who went on to do the Resident Evil movies. It stars Jude Law and Sadie Frost. SFW, one of Reese Witherspoon's very worst movies, and she's made some real stinkers. This one was sort of an edgy indie drama with Stephen Dorff, in which they curse throughout the entire thing. Holy Matrimony was one of Joseph Gordon-Levitt's first movies. I think this was actually before Third Rock from the Sun. He plays this Hasidic Jewish boy who, through funny circumstances, has to marry Patricia Arquette, who of course is much too old for him because he's only like 11 years old or something like that. I Love Trouble was a huge flop. Julia Roberts and Nick Nolte were starring in this action comedy. And it got such terrible scores by audiences ahead of time that they tried to remarket it as a straight thriller, but it's really more of a comedy. Getting In was the first, a movie directed by Doug Liman before Swingers, actually. Before Edge of Tomorrow, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and The Bourne Identity, he did this movie, Getting In, which is a college comedy, I think. Never saw it. And finally, I want to mention I'll Do Anything, which also had Nick Nolte in it. And it was actually supposed to be a musical until it tested badly and they cut all the musical numbers from the entire picture. Anyway, that was long wrap up on 1994. Plenty of good movies, plenty of terrible movies. And I don't know if I'll be doing another one of these next year or what have you, but I just thought you might find that fun. Thanks for watching, guys, and I will be doing a video on all the movies that I've been seeing during the first half of the year very, very soon, so I hope you'll tune in for that. Appreciate it. Later.